Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights webinar titled Reclaiming the Narrative, Black Women's Experiences in the Workplace. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you all know how to participate in tonight's event. This program will be recorded. Given this is a webinar, guests will not be able to be seen on camera. All audience members will also be muted. As an audience member, you have the ability to drop questions in the Q&A tab, and you have the option to submit questions anonymously. Due to time constraints, please keep all questions on topic. Please note that questions we do not get to this afternoon may be answered as a follow-up after the event. You may also email us at communityrelations@njcivilrights.gov. Resource links and contact information will be shared in the chat throughout the program. If you experience any technical difficulties today, please explain your problem through the chat feature, and we will try our best to address the issue. Lastly, please follow the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights on Facebook and Twitter at Civil Rights NJ for the latest information on news, resources, and information from our office. Now, I'd like to introduce Tisha Leonardo Santiago. Tisha serves as the Interim Director of Outreach and Community Relations for the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, everyone. Happy Women's History Month and Spring Equinox. Welcome to tonight's program, and thank you for joining us. Whether born a woman or coming to live in your authentic self, those of us who identify as women may be granddaughters, daughters, sisters, aunts, spouses, parents, and caregivers. But we're also contributors and pioneers to all fields from medicine, technology, engineering, mathematics, to business, education, and international policies. In March 2020, life changed as we knew it. Many of us still recovering from the emotional, physical, and economic impact of COVID-19 had on us and our loved ones. The effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the job market in 2020 were widespread, but the effects were not only felt equally across race and ethnicity groups. Black women in particular experienced high rates of unemployment during the pandemic. March 14th marked Equal Pay Day, but Black women's Equal Pay Day isn't until July 27th of this year, according to the National Pay Equity Committee. Department of Labor's February 2022 article, Black Women's Economic Recovery Continues to Lag, highlighted that the different experiences of Black women in the pandemic and the recovery are caused by multiple overlapping factors. First, before the pandemic, Black women were disproportionately likely to be employed in some of the hardest hit sectors. Second, data from prior recessions showed that when there were economic shocks, Black and Hispanic workers are more vulnerable to losing their jobs, and recovery takes longer for Black and Hispanic women. And third, Black women are also overrepresented in the care economy, and the ongoing crisis in this sector continues to have a disproportionate impact on Black women. The intersection of racism and sexism means that Black women are experiencing a different and more difficult recovery, not just because of the types of jobs that they're likely to hold, but also because they are treated differently within those jobs. Tonight, we will focus on the Black women's experience in the workplace. Our powerful panel of speakers will explore with you, the audience, the lived experiences of Black women navigating work pre- and post-pandemic, microaggressions, racism, and discrimination in the workplace, and ways to navigate it. Self-care utilized by Black workers as minorities in the workplace. For example, being part of a resource group, mentorships, and others. Navigating majority white workplaces as a minority, and navigating minority-led spaces, for example, Black-owned businesses. Lastly, we will learn about the protections afforded under the New Jersey law against discrimination, and how to report acts of discrimination and bias-based harassment on the New Jersey Bias Investigation Access System. Without further ado, I turn the program over to our moderator for this evening, New Jersey Division on Civil Rights Community Relations Specialist, Patricia Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tisha, and good evening, everyone. Happy Women's Month. We are excited to bring to you today Reclaiming the Narrative. And we want to just talk a little bit more about Black women and their experiences in the workplace. We have a phenomenal group of women to speak to these topics. And what I'd like to do at this time is introduce them to you one by one. You will have a full view of their biographies. However, I'm going to just read a small portion of each one of them just so you have an idea of who you're going to be listening to today. The first person is Sharnette M. Clark. She is the Chief Probation Officer for Vicinage 1, Atlantic Cape May counties. Ms. Clark oversees and manages all probation division operations, including adult, juvenile, and child support enforcement. In April 2023, this will mark 32 years of service for Ms. Clark with the Superior Court of New Jersey. Ms. Clark received her Bachelor of Arts degree from Drew University and her Master of Arts degree from Seton Hall University. Cherie Davis, PhD, is the Associate Director with the Center for Innovation in Worker Organization. She is also Assistant Professor of Professional Practice with the Labor Studies and Employment Relations Department in the School of Management and Labor Relations at Rutgers University. She co-directs the Will Empower Women Innovating Labor Leadership Program, a joint initiative with the Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor at Georgetown University. As co-director for Will Empower, Davis hosts 2 cohorts of learning and mentoring, one for women emerging leaders, as well as one for women in executive leadership roles. Davis completed her doctorate in American Studies in the Graduate Institute of the Liberal Arts at Emory University. She also holds a Master of Arts in Women's Studies from The Ohio State University and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Political Science from Spelman College. Janae J. Johnson, Esquire, serves as the inaugural director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, also known as the Office of Equity, an office charged under Executive Order 265 to develop and support a statewide infrastructure for equity that covers state agencies, personnel employed by the state, and recipients of state funds. Through the coordination of policy-making processes within and across state agencies, guidance to the governor and other state leaders, and the development of a strategic plan with measurable benchmarks, the Office of Equity works to strengthen the state workforce and improve outcomes for the people of New Jersey. Johnson received her LLM through the George Washington University School of Law, earned her JD from Rutgers University Law School in Newark, New Jersey, and a BA in International Studies from Oakwood University. Melissa Walker, Mel Walker, is a legal specialist at Division on Civil Rights in the Strategic Initiatives and Enforcement Unit. She leads in discrimination issues involving race, disability, and health equity related to policy and investigative work. It's common for Mel to be involved with other topic areas such as housing due to how her topics intersect with everything else. Mel graduated from Seton Hall Law School in 2020, and during her last year, she served as Student Bar Association president and participated in the Health Law Clinic. I'd like to welcome all 4 of you to our panel discussion today. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I have so many questions for you, but I know all of you aren't going to be able to answer all of the questions. So we've already talked about a few. I'm going to toss to some of you, and then if afterwards you feel that you want to add something to a question, please do. This is why we're going to do this all as a panel. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My first question is to explain your personal journey to where you are today as a Black woman in the workplace. If there were times where you were implicitly or explicitly discriminated against, please share them if you are comfortable. I'd like to start with Chief Clark.
I always forget to take myself off of mute. The great thing about working with the judicial system, I had an opportunity to grow within the judicial system. I started in 1991. So I've had the opportunity of doing 20 years in Essex County in the family division. And then I've grown into Atlantic and Cape May in the family division, and then now as a chief of probation. So you experience also your youthfulness. So they see you as not able to understand or comprehend certain things based on your age. Are you able to be a leader and be able to expound on things and direct people because of your age? So that was a struggle for me when I had leadership positions. So I had to, of course, go back to school, get my master's degree, show that I can be a leadership in leadership positions. I had to take other classes. I had to put myself out there in other forums, such as take more training, be in the forefront, apply for promotional positions so that I can be seen. A lot of times they just wanted you to be in meetings just to take notes. You don't have to say anything, just take notes. Also in my position as a manager, you're not respected as just being a person of color. Would I get the same respect if I was a male, not even just a white male, just a male? Would my staff respond to me in the same way when I'm given a directive or when I'm expressing that I need certain things done in a certain time frame? I didn't get that when I first became a manager in 2016. It was a struggle for me. I was looked upon as being more demanding. I was being maybe a bully because they saw that maybe the way that I expressed myself maybe wasn't in the tone or the demeanor that they expected it to be. But I felt that sometimes that I had to maybe write more memos, hold more meetings just to get my point across. And sometimes I may had to be somewhat abrasive because I needed to be heard, because sometimes I felt like my point was not heard. Maybe I needed to have that second meeting, call my supervisor to come in and assist me to getting a point across. And that sometimes was somewhat frustrating. Yes, it did take time to get that respect, to get that trust, but would that have happened if I was not a female and a female of color? So that was a struggle for me. My years experience, I think, has now given me the autonomy to be a little bit more expressive. I think my years of experience now gives me the ability to now observe the room, to give me an opportunity to know my audience and how to express myself, especially if I'm the only female in the room. So sometimes you have to be more direct, be clear that you understand the topic that's being discussed. You have to be more prepared for a meeting. You have to be more descriptive to show that you understand what is going on, and sometimes overly prepared. That has just been how I've experienced implicit bias and having to show that I am a leader, that I deserve to be in the position that I'm in, and that I've earned that right to be there, and that I didn't do it by favoritism, or that I dated someone, or, that I did it based on my skill set, and that I worked the 32 years to be where I am, and I deserve to be there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your sharing. I want to open this up also to anyone else that may want to share their journey or a portion of their journey. What I'll do, if I'm also going to ask the next question along with it, and just ask if someone would please discuss what you've seen or learned about microaggressions, racism, and discrimination in the workplace and ways that people navigate it. So I'd like to move in this space over to Dr. Davis Faulkner. You're muted.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for having us. It's always a pleasure to be on a panel where you just get to nod your head and you get a little bit of validation that it's not you. And so I appreciate being able to kind of hear from you, Sharnette. Thank you so much. I think, one of the things that I often think about in terms of microaggressions is that now we're getting to the point where we're calling things microaggressions that are they're just macro. Because I come up through academia, and I know that sometimes in certain spaces you have to use the lingo or operate in kind of the systems that people are used to. I'm always looking for teachable moments. And I remember when I first started at Rutgers, for the first couple of years, my program is specifically focused on women and women's leadership. But every time it's like I'm walking down the hallway and they're like, hey, there was something that happened with Black people in the newspaper today and I wanted to show it to you. Or, hey, I have some Black people in a program and I was thinking that maybe you should help me think about the Black people in the program. And, after a little while, I was like, hey, y'all do know that my program is focused on women, right? And that I have expertise. I actually have I have degrees in women's studies. Like, this is an area where I can lean into too, but there's a way in which you get categorized for having an identity knowledge and kind of ignore maybe what your expertise is that you've developed along the way. And I did want to kind of speak to the last question and say, sometimes there aren't pathways, right, for us to know how to get to these places where we can have the power, pull the levers, know where decisions are being made, be in the decision-making room. And we have to create and cut these pathways, and so I think really about like, why did I get a doctorate? And for me, I tell people all the time, don't get a doctorate unless you need it. But I knew if you wanted to do the kind of programming that kind of pushed open space, that you actually had to have these letters behind your name for people to even listen to you sometimes. And so there's a way that Black women end up having to go and get more and more degrees, even when they have experience, life experience that would give them all of what they need to be able to hold a role. But we have to kind of bring and show in multiple different dimensions, why we deserve to be in that space and how we can actually move things in the direction that maybe people say on paper that they want, but they don't necessarily know how to move and make it happen. And so there's just a number of different ways that we're impacted by having to invest in our own education, bet on ourselves, build the thing that isn't there. They won't let us at this table, so we have to go build another table and then bring the programming over there and have people say, oh, wait a minute, you're doing the thing over there. We want to do that, right? But sometimes we have to build stuff even to just get things moving, and we aren't able to tap into the systems that are already in place. And so I just think it's important to think about like the ways that we do a lot of shaping that gets ignored, that doesn't get credited, and we need to change that.
Thank you. Anybody else? I see heads nodding. Okay. All right.
I just wanted to add back to the shaping that it's okay to be your authentic self. I felt that growing up in Newark, in the inner city, in the projects, that I had to shy away from that, and that I couldn't always tell my story, because if I tell my story, then they won't pick me or allow me to be a part of something, because they'll say that I'm not depicting what they want their arena or their system or their area to be. But I realized that as long as I'm comfortable to be who I am, I'm giving them the best me that I can be. Because if I'm being, how I tell myself, a fraud, then that fake it till you make it, sometimes you don't make it. So you have to be your authentic self, and you have to be comfortable in your skin. And I'm okay sharing my story. I'm okay with who I am, because my upbringing is who made me who I am today. And I think that's why I'm able to be the chief. That's why I'm able to be the leader of a great organization. And I'm able to share what I'm sharing today to great individuals that are on this great panel today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Janae, I see you just came off of mute.
Yes, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Janae Johnson. It's such a pleasure to be on with you all. I'm really excited for this opportunity and just this opportunity to share. I really co-sign with Dr. Davis Faulkner that it's just it feels like a safe space and a inviting space, and so it is great to join. And thank you, Ms. Williamson, and to DCR for hosting us this evening. Just for anyone who may be visually challenged, I like to just say that I'm a Black woman with braids over my right shoulder, wearing a Black jacket, and I'm really glad to be able to be part of this discussion. Patricia kind of gave that intro and bio, which is, a part of, your professional work. But when you come into these conversations and really come into our work, you come in as a mother, you come in as a daughter. I'm a daughter of a veteran and of a school teacher, mother of two. And so those lived experiences are such a real part of my everyday being. And so one of the joys that I have in this position in leading equity and helping to ensure that it's embedded in our agencies. And I see some champions, I see some folks from DCF and some of our agencies that are on the call, and I'm glad that you are with us, is that we want to look at equity. It's not about being in an equal situation, right? That we see that many of us are not similarly situated, but what is needed in order for us to have fair and equal outcomes. And so that has to be something that we assess and that we look at. And so part of what our work looks to see is that we want to be able to give voice to folks to be able to say, like, this is how a legacy of injury and systemic and structural barriers has affected individuals, and their situation, where their starting point looks different than yours. And so I'm glad to be able to give voice to that from my own experience, from advocacy work, from work that, really has kind of been passion work over a career and lifetime. And so that is a really integral part. And I think often being able to shine that light and give voice to it in our workplaces, in workplaces, so that they can be places where we can feel a sense of belonging. I think often, folks don't feel heard, they feel overshadowed, they feel outnumbered, they feel marginalized, and that diminishes their ability to really show up. And so that's an important part of our work.
Thank you so much, Janae. I'm loving this. Mel, I'm going to bring you in at this point. So for everyone, Mel and I both work with the Division on Civil Rights. I'm in the Community Relations Unit. She's in the Strategic Initiative and Enforcement Unit. And so we do get a chance to work together from time to time. And the question I'm going to ask you, I'm going to pivot a little bit. We've been talking about recognizing what's going on in the workplace. And so I want to continue that, but ask you to address any bias incident data. Do you have any data for African Americans and or women in the workplace and or on campuses where we can talk about what it is that perhaps they are experiencing, if it's been reported in the workplace or the campus?
So I'm going to start off by saying that data, the specific data you want, is not out yet, and I wasn't able to specifically find it, but I do have other data which I would love to share. So first thing first, thank you for inviting me. Mel Walker speaking. I'm going to describe myself like Ms. Johnson did. I have fluffy hair, Black woman, Black jacket, and a yellow and blue shirt on. All right, so back to the data question. What I do know is that in 2020, New Jersey had the highest number of reported bias incidents. We had 1,447, which was a 45% increase from the year before. And so just for everyone to know, a bias incident is any suspected or confirmed act of bias intimidation. So basically for 2020, 62% of those cases are over 1,000 was because of race, ethnicity, ancestry. And gender, which included sex, gender identity, gender expression, and transgender status, that accounted for 15%. But the biggest thing is that, as for the case, like from every other year in 2020, Black people were once again more frequent targets of racially motivated reported bias incidents, and anti-Black racism was the motivation for 39% of all the reports. Now, in the workplace, there were some studies, and it basically showed that Black women are literally the most undervalued and overworked employee, with Black women on average earning $40K less than their non-Hispanic white male counterparts in the state of New Jersey. And like this wage gap means a lot. It's like we can't support our families, we can't support ourselves. We have to make certain decisions about our lives that other people don't have to. And some of the reasons for the wage gap is because a lot of Black women do not feel like they are treated with respect in the workplace, which is a huge issue because it basically means like they're experiencing discrimination, they're experiencing a hostile work environment, they're experiencing retaliation for reporting things, that we have to make these decisions of leaving or being ousted from like executive positions. In New Jersey, there actually were a few lawsuits this year, multiple lawsuits this year, focusing on hospital executives being ousted, Black faculty members, Black women faculty members at colleges, multiple colleges this year that are being ousted from their positions due to the discrimination they experienced during their time there, and also the lack of support they had from administration, they had from other executives or just other employees. And on the flip side, at college campuses, I've already said something about college, they are also known for creating racially hostile environments. So another study was put out about college campuses specifically. And what was found that 1 out of 5 Black people feel or experience discrimination on a college campus. And that's 1 out of 4 for campuses that are predominantly white with the least amount of diversity. And what they do, they experience implicit bias, their needs are undermined, and also diverse student orgs are targeted with hate speech. We've actually had a few hate speech incidents this year, but with a few college campuses that I won't name, but they're on Instagram, it's on Facebook, you can Google it. And it's more just the disparaging reason of like how we are trying to uplift ourselves, but every time we go to these college campuses, we are just attacked at every angle, and it's actually quite depressing. So, but basically, I do want to point out one thing. BCR actually put out a guidance document on addressing bias in college campus, and it's beneficial to all, but it focuses on what students, faculty, and staff should do to prevent bias incidents and like steps it takes to after a bias incident has occurred. And I personally feel that, especially when it comes to college campuses and work, it's important to have a game plan of how to prevent bias incidents in your colleges, in your workplaces, and what to do after they have it, because holding people accountable and making sure that the institution itself is holding itself accountable is a great way of making people of color, Black and brown people, especially Black women, feeling more comfortable and confident in their workplaces. I hope I answered that well enough.
You did. Thank you so much. The data sometimes can be a little sobering, but you mentioned, the report with DCR, and we're certainly working on that. And this is a perfect time for me to pivot from the recognition into the response. And so what I'd like to do at this time is bring Janae back into this and ask, how do DEI initiatives help combat racism in employment and create an inclusive environment?
Thanks for that question. And I think just, relating to the data when one of my mentors, Dr. Janice Underwood, who leads DEIA, the A for Accessibility in the federal government, she will often say that you cannot change what you do not assess, and you cannot assess what you do not acknowledge. And so I appreciate this conversation because I think it's important for us to acknowledge the circumstances. I think the data reveals and helps us to see where we are and what we need to do, and then helps us to give an opportunity for us to work intentionally towards addressing the issues that are identified through the data. So thank you for that, Mel. And for the question, Patricia, when we look at our office, I think there are several prongs really to the work that we're doing, because I think when we even are informed by the private sector, when you have a workspace that is not siloed and where folks are included, where the population of the surroundings, and in our case, in our state, are reflected in the workplace, it increases productivity and efficiency. And so ultimately, that is what we want to see. We want our state government to respond and to meet the resident experiences and needs that we have. And so the better that we are equipped to do that, the better the outcomes. And so that really is the goal of our work. But internally, there are lots of places where we can begin, and we are assessing to see how can we improve and strengthen our workspaces and within state government. And so the governor in February signed an executive order that requires each agency to designate a point person at the senior level to lead and to help to embed equity within their agencies and to work with us across state government. And so that is an important part of that, to have a cohesive and comprehensive approach to this is one, avenue that we are diligently working to ensure, because we want to be sure that we're aligned across state government as we approach this work, and that we have benchmarks that we're all working towards. And then looking at what does that look like, our work has identified, and really our office is a liaison to the Wealth Disparity Task Force, which says and looks at the causes of the wealth inequities that we see between Black and Brown New Jerseyans and our white neighbors. And so when we look at the systemic issues that are leading in housing, criminal justice, education, our economy at large, and health inequities, some of which Tisha mentioned at the beginning, coming, exacerbated by the pandemic, what can we do to close some of these opportunity gaps, some of these experience gaps, and these wealth gaps? And so there's a task force of over 25 folks from the agencies, external stakeholders who are working together to look at some ways that we can help to respond in each area. And so the governor announced in his budget address that one of those areas, when we look at the home ownership rates and this legacy really of housing challenges that we have in our nation and in our state, you can look at federal practices dating back to the 30s, beginning with redlining, but DCR has, even recently still addressing some of those same issues that we're seeing in the state. And so there's a lot of work to do, but one of the areas that we're excited about is a first generation home buyer down payment assistance program, that in addition to our first time home buyer program, there's an added resources that are available through the proposal from the governor's budget for first generation home buyers. And so that speaks to this right sizing that we need in our home ownership imbalance in our state, where you have less than half of Black families who are renting and unable to purchase their homes and own their own homes. And so we're looking to help to support and to ensure that we are encouraging home ownership and that we are supporting folks' ability to develop and build wealth. And there's lots of supports and things that need to be a part of help to right size mention this. Sometimes folks will say, well, this is a lack of determination or a lack of grit. But when we really look at some of the structural issues that we find, we have to repair those. And when we do that, we give folks the opportunity for their choices to result in the outcomes that they are working towards. And so we're, diligently working towards those efforts and working across agencies to help to support in each area that we see need, whether it's education in our criminal justice system. So it's a lot, that we are undertaking, but really grateful for the opportunity to be able to work towards building what the governor will say, a state of opportunity in New Jersey.
Thank you, Janae. And I just wanted to, a quick follow-up. I just wanted to ask, the executive order that you referred to, is that Executive Order 319?
Yes, that is Executive Order 319. Yeah.
Okay, great. Just so we'll have it for the record. Thank you. And also from what Janae did, and I want to do this myself as well. So just in terms of a visual description of myself, I am African American. Let me just say, all of us in this are African American women, beautiful African American women, I might add. And we are, so in case we don't all remember, but I'm African American. I have what you may call a press and curl from back in the day hairstyle. And I straightened my natural hair, and I have a red dress on, and that's what I look like today. So now with that description, oh, and also my pronouns are she, her, hers. So just want to make sure everyone is comfortable with all of the descriptions. And so now what I would like to do is have this similar question for Dr. Davis. My question for you in this area of response, we've recognized, and now we're going into response. My question is, what are some ways minorities in the workplace, particularly Black women, can help themselves through times of discrimination? Do mentoring or resource groups help? Do unions help? Just want to open that up for you.
And also modeling or following in you all's footsteps. I am Black woman. I'm wearing glasses newly, first time wearing brown glasses. And my hair is kind of curly and orangish, orange brown. And I'm wearing some dangly earrings that have blue and cream shells, and I have on a blue dress. And my background has Audre Lorde and Octavia Butler and a whole bunch of books. So in terms of thinking about the ways that we move into what we do and what's helpful, I want to speak from two different perspectives. You know, as a member of the board of the National Black Worker Center, one of the things that we've been building over the past, actually 4 or 5 years, is a campaign around a Black Worker Bill of Rights. And one of the things that we found is that, you know, people can feel when something is not right, but they don't always have the language to be able to identify or name what's happening. And so it might be a range of things like, you know, being told that you have to cut your hair in order to take a job or take your braids out or something along those lines. It could be around the ideas of professionalism, right? And in some ways, when we start talking about habits of white supremacy culture, and we talk about that a lot, that there's certain behaviors that are identified as ideal in the way that people should conduct themselves. And then there are ways of being able to exclude people. And so when we moved away from the culture of being able to overtly say, you can't come in here, right? Like I can say, you're excluded from coming to this building, from swimming in this pool, from having this job, you name it, very structural, concrete things, into what was a little bit more covert. There was a culture that we were having to work through. And so some of the challenges that we are feeling is that sense that we have to assimilate, that we have to act a particular way in order to have a particular job. And what that does is it makes it hard for you to be able to name when you're being discriminated against. And it also makes you feel like maybe it's just me, maybe it's not happening to anyone else. But I've never had a scenario where I put, you know, a room full of Black women together and they weren't able to like very quickly identify that some of the experiences that they're having, no matter what kind of job they're in, that they are similar experiences, that there's similar feelings in their body, and that oftentimes they feel silenced and unable to talk about it. And to me, this is where being organized matters. And so, you know, I always say an organized people are powerful people, and that you should have vehicles for being able to operationalize, you know, what it means to push back. And so with the Black Worker Centers, which are growing, honestly, across the country, I'm actually working with a couple of different fledgling Black Worker Centers now. But the idea is to put a spotlight on the areas that people don't pay close attention to. So in areas where we see high concentrations of Black people, temp workers, right? In care work, in work that has been raced in a particular way and feminized in a particular way, that always tends to be low wage work. And so having the opportunity to have some place to go, know your rights trainings, you know, how to get the phone numbers, how to advocate for yourself, how to advocate as a collective and to build collective power always matters. What we have often had are labor unions. And, you know, when you start looking at the statistics, what you'll find is that particularly Black women, especially in the public sector, who have had access to a union have been able to significantly improve not only their living conditions, but to impact that for generations. And so, you know, it really is a matter of very concrete ways of being able to not only negotiate around your wages and your benefits through a union, but I say the grievance procedure is usually the most powerful thing in your union contract, because it doesn't matter what kind of wages you have if you don't have a job. If somebody can come in, have a bad day, and determine that you are now fired and you have no recourse. And so those types of things really do matter. And then, and putting my other hat on with Will Empower, one of the things that we always embed is both mentoring programs for our apprentices and emerging leaders, but we also have peer coaching, right? Like being in dialogue around these issues is sometimes the thing that will actually help you to be able to know what is happening. Trying to keep it to yourself, trying to figure it out on your own can be extremely challenging, but like talking with someone else who can give you a sense of the history. We talk a lot about inclusion right now, but the problem is that oftentimes people don't want to talk about the exclusion that created the conditions that we're trying to correct. And so these are some of the vehicles and some of the spaces for being able to do that and making sure that we repair the harm that has already happened, but ensure that that harm does not continue to happen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's rich. Chief Clark, I wanted to circle back to you for a moment and just the last portion of my question, in terms of the response, did you find that mentoring or resource groups help or union? How were you able to move through those times of discrimination when those occurred for you?
Well, as a supervisor, I definitely had the opportunity of having a union. So a union was definitely there to support me. Now, as a court executive, of course, I don't have a union. So you definitely want to be able to talk with other managers. And I am very fortunate where I have retired managers who I see as mentors, who I meet with on a regular basis. Sometimes I do need to vent and I need to talk things out. And I need to talk to my fellow sisters and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm going through. How do I navigate? How do I push through? Because we all need to eat. We all need to take care of our families. And sometimes we need to know how to properly do those things, because I don't have a union. And so I need to make sure that I keep my job. So I want to make sure that I advocate for myself And I also need to be seen so that other brown women see me and know how to do it for themselves as well. So I need to set an example. I need to set a pathway, and I need to be able to strategize so that those that are coming after me know how to do that as well. So most importantly, in my job, I know every contract of my staff. And I train my supervisors. I tell them, you know their contract, because when we need to negotiate or when there are grievances, we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I think that is what makes you a great leader, because you need to make sure that you're following the guidelines and procedures that are set forth so that you can be able to manage a group of 120 people. We also have a lot of initiatives that are set forth that we are doing with the community through community engagement. So not only am I seen within the organization that I work with, but I'm also now working in the community with the city of Atlantic City, the county, Pleasantville, Cape May. So I'm working with other entities. We're now working with our gun violence initiative. You know, there's a lot of things that are happening in the city of Atlantic City with violence. So we want them to be aware that probation is not there just on a punitive level, but we're there to help. And we're there to try to change a mindset. We're now working with other entities to assist our clients in workforce development and getting GEDs, getting trades, getting training. We're currently right now working in a cohort called Apex, where our clients, men and women, are getting certified in project management, in construction certification, in OSHA certification. So we're trying to assist our clients that are on probation, that they can have better lives after probation. So probation is just not the end of their story. So we're showing that there are better things that they can do for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. And as a Black chief, I am setting that example. And there are 5 Black chiefs in the state of New Jersey, and all female. And we're setting that example across the state. So, and we work well together. We communicate with each other. We share experiences with each other. And not just the fact that there are 5 female Black chiefs, but there are 10 women chiefs altogether in the state of New Jersey. And that is something that has never been seen before in history. And even in my organization, we have 65% that are female officers, which was unheard of before in the history of probation. So just to make sure that, not that I don't want to use the word of straight and narrow, but you have to have an understanding of the system. You have to have a respect for the system. And you have to be knowledgeable of what's going on, because for those that are not unionized, for those that don't have a protection of the union, that is how you protect yourselves and those that are in that umbrella like you. And I wanted to do the same as others. So this is something new for me. Mm-hmm. I am a very chocolate brown skinned young woman, and I have braids as well in a bun. I have a black and white polka dot dress with a big black bow. And so I just wanted to give that presentation of myself. And thank you, ladies, because we learn things every day. So I appreciate that as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I wanted to make sure you had that opportunity as well. And thank you again, Janae, for starting us on that and teaching us how we should move forward. Did anyone else want to answer that question in terms of how to navigate once you know you're being discriminated against? You know, do you have your mentors? Do you have some recourse within yourself in terms of resiliency? Did anyone else want to answer that question? Mel?
Yes. Hello, everyone again. So first and foremost, I want to start by saying this. I am pretty new to the legal field. like Patricia said, I graduated in 2020. And I had the absolute wonderful pleasure of my two bosses since graduating from law school being Black women. And let me tell you, they instilled into me the lift as you climb and mentorship. Without them, I don't think I would be the person I am today. And to kind of circle back to all the points you guys are talking about, they made sure I knew about the union. They made sure I participated in the union. They made sure that I had the information necessary to succeed, to uplift myself, to affirm myself and validate how wonderful, beautiful, smart, intellectual I am as a Black woman here, and to make me feel like I had a safe space. So I am 100% for providing everyone around me with the mentorship to make sure that we do succeed and we keep succeeding how we are meant to, because we're really smart. Black women, we lead on the amount of higher education, master's degrees in the country. Cool, we're awesome. But to that, I do understand that, like, once you're in these places, there are incidents that will happen. There's discrimination that you would face and what to do once that happens. So as a member of DCR, and I'm pretty sure someone's going to tell you this sooner or later, you can file a complaint with us. It sounds easy to do. It's like you go to NJ Bias, you fill out a complaint packet, but there's a lot that will weigh on you. Fear of retaliation, fear of, losing status in your job, fear of having to leave, just fear of like not getting raises. Is like, there's so much you have to think and go over before you can file a complaint, because once again, as Black women, we're the least paid. We're the most that are forced out of our jobs. So we have more to think about. We have more responsibilities. We're more likely to have responsibilities to our families, to be breadwinners. We just have so much weighing on us. And I'm just going to flip it back to like the mentorship. That's like why we need our mentors. So we can have people to talk these things through. We can have people to reach out, people looking out for us, make sure that if this is an opportunity that we cannot have, to help us find a different opportunity somewhere else. And also see if we can shame those people for like ruining our opportunities, but that's a different story. And another thing that I believe is really important is just try to make sure to do what we can in our ability to make sure that when you're in these situations of discrimination, those people, the wrongdoers, make sure they're held accountable. If you can't do it, make sure you can try to get like a higher up or executive to hold them accountable some way, some shape or form. Because if we don't stop it now, like it might just continue going on. And literally, I personally feel, since I'm in the position where I'm allowed to fight, I feel like other Black women in the position should take it up, because I understand that's my privilege. Like, it's weird saying privilege as a Black woman, but that's my privilege as a Black woman. I have the time, the effort, the money, the support to take on these fights to hopefully prevent someone else who doesn't have the time, the effort, and the support to take on the fight, so they don't have to do it, so they will be okay.
Thank you so much, Mel. Mm-hmm. This next question I'm going to ask is for anyone, but I'm going to start it with Dr. Davis. Is there a difference between navigating the workplace as a minority in a majority white business versus navigating in a majority-owned business?
The challenge that I have, can I just say that there is something really beautiful to be said about having and the opportunity to work for Black women. I think I've only ever worked for Black women and one white woman in my career. And it changes the way that, like, what you think is possible in a workplace. And also, we're seeing more Black women's leadership. And so the kinds of questions that get asked. So when we're talking about, keeping people out of prison and making sure that they have the resources that they need. And so we're talking about housing. We're talking about like the things that people need to be able to pay attention to. You're able to bring a whole lived experience and a whole community to a role and like stretch it out in the ways that we know we need to do it. And then if you're in community with other Black women who are in this role, it's like you can reset the agenda. Like you can actually open it up, make it expansive. And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting. I didn't send this resource, but Janelle Jones coined the term Black Women's Best. And it talks about equity and this piece around like when you focus on trying to get the best for Black women, that it tends to ensure that other people get the best too, right? That is a way of looking at the economy and how we want the types of policies that we need to be able to reshape the economy in ways that are equitable, because in so many ways, Black women were not the subjects, not the vision when we start thinking about like how laws and policies are made and shaped. I do want to say that I've worked in a number of different spaces, and I always have somehow managed to keep a toe at Spelman, right? Like even when I was working at Georgia Tech, I always taught a class at Spelman because there is a thing about being in Black environments where there's a knowingness and there might be a way of being able to move that feels a little bit more comfortable, but that doesn't change the fact that people might not be following the union contract. People might not necessarily even know how to go about managing folks. And that sometimes there's that sense that you don't want to say something against your own folks. And so there's challenges in that space of being able to say, we have to bring all the rules and the regulations together. But then there's also some pieces around culture that might feel a little bit more comfortable than, say, if you're in a predominantly white environment. And then I will say at the same time, I've been in predominantly white environments where there was very deliberate work happening to create space around diversity across the board. And so in the same way that Janae helped us to be thinking about accessibility, that I just do think that there's, different infrastructure that we put in PWIs to be able to have protections that we might be more likely to use in those spaces than sometimes we might be willing to use in the spaces that are predominantly Black. But at the same time, I still come back to being in an organization, whether it is a committee or some kind of way that you are engaged around these topics, give you the language to say, actually, this policy says this thing right here, and I need you, I want us to discuss this because this isn't lining up with that policy. And something in writing is always going to be the best thing for Black women. It's like, hey, what's the policy? What's the practice? Write it down. Because when we can see it in writing, we can say, all right, let's have a conversation about getting in alignment. But when we don't have it written down, it's like people can move the goalpost. And it makes it really hard for you to figure out, is it just me? Are other people having this experience? And being able to nail down how you make improvements. And so I just think it's different in different spaces.
Thank you. Anyone else? Janae? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, Dr. Davis, I really appreciate your point because I think it really resonates too with what we know for our civil rights history, that as we look to ensure that Blacks had civil rights honored and the democracy that we have promised was inclusive of them, it opened up the door. It became a gateway that opened up opportunities for women, for immigrants, and for ensuring that our American promise reached everyone. And so I think in a similar way, when we open up our spaces to often the most marginalized, which in many cases, I think the data Mel was describing can often be Black women, it opens up our workplaces to everyone. And so I think that's an important part of this work. And I think I'm hopeful that people will see that, as we look to ensure that our geographic diversity, our faith and our language, our cultural diversity is reflected in our spaces, it breaks down silos across workspaces. And so that's an important part of this work, is really a gateway. But I think it's also, intrinsic upon us, though, to recognize that there are some long-standing issues that we do need to address. And so I think, when we look at the the complex and compounding impact of being a woman and a woman of color, of being a Black woman. There are some singular injuries that do need to be acknowledged and to be remedied. But I think the gain in that is that as we remedy those, we are also opening up opportunities across the spectrum.
Thank you both. Let's now move. We've talked about recognizing, we've talked about responding, and now I'd like to look at reporting. Let's talk about protections that are now provided. So this is going to be open to all of you. What protections are provided through laws and executive orders or policies? So I know, Janae, you already mentioned one in terms of Executive Order 319, but I also want to bring up the Crown Act, the Equal Pay Act, other DEI initiatives perhaps not covered earlier. It still sticks in my mind that Tisha said our Black Equity Pay Day is July 27th. That's a long way away before we finally are making the same amount as a white man. So I just want to touch on what the protections are as we start coming to a close. And Mel, I'll come to you. We'll talk about New Jersey law against discrimination last, but I want to see if there's anybody else or you can talk, but yeah, I want to talk about that particular one last as we go into NJ bias. So
yeah, so I'm just going to talk about two different acts. I'm going to talk about the Fair Chance in Housing Act and the New Jersey Family Leave Act. So DCR reinforced the Family Leave Act, and that provides job protected leave for people to care for family members, So anyone that works for a covered employer, which is a state or a local government agency or a company or organization with 30 or more employees, and have been employed by the company for at least a year and have worked at least 1,000 hours in the past 12 months, they can generally take up to 12 weeks of job protected leave. So this is important because during the pandemic, Black women were most likely to lose their jobs because they were caretakers. They couldn't find the people to watch their kids, watch their family members, because that's another job responsibility that we as Black women have taken up because I think we're awesome. So what does this mean? It's basically just like for these circumstances, New Jersey will protect Black women to take off and take care of their family members for up to 12 weeks a year. And that's really necessary because we are doing this intersection of like responsibilities outside of work. And then we have the Fair Chance in Housing Act. So again, this law actually provides resources for families in preventing discrimination in housing. And under the Fair Chance in Housing Act, housing providers, are never required to consider housing's applicant's criminal history if the housing provider does not. If the housing provider does, they cannot ask about specific types of convictions, such as they can't ask about arrest charges that did not result in a criminal conviction, expunged convictions, evictions erased through executive pardons, sealed records, vacated and otherwise legally nullified convictions, juvenile educations of delinquency. And if a housing provider chooses to consider criminal history, it must make a conditional offer before doing so. That means they cannot ask for criminal history on any initial application, interview, or any way, shape, or form before a conditional offer. There are some unlesses, like if you're making meth, that's one. Sexual offender, that's another one. But so what does it mean for Black women? And first of all, we are also overcriminalized in certain areas, and it's already hard to for Black women to find places to live at. So we just removed another barrier that was there against us because, over criminalized, over arrest, landlords would just straight up deny Black women because of these. So those are two other laws.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if there are any other DEI initiatives or any other initiatives that we haven't already discussed that would talk about protecting Black women in the workplace? Okay, hearing that, I'm going to come back to you, Mel. wait,
I
Dr.
don't know any, but I just wanted to say that it is very important because as a young single mom, I thought that it was very important that I found employment that protected me in those areas. So maybe that is why I'm a public employee, but I wanted to make sure that I was protected so that I can care for my young son. If I wanted to have more children, if I needed to care for a family member, I made sure that I educated myself and looked at what benefits my employer was going to offer me. So to educate some of our sisters here, we really need to look at what our jobs are offering us. I know sometimes you have to take what you can get, but it's very important to look at those things. And sometimes we don't really look at what the benefits that our employers are offering us. 401ks, our pensions, our medical, our healthcare. Also, even with family leaves, you have to be employed with the job a year in order to be afforded those benefits. So just having a understanding, a knowledge of those things and what you are able to get. So that was very important to me. You know, how much prescriptions, you know, my son was an asthmatic, you know, we can go in about Black children in that, you know, but, you know, I needed to know those things. Could I afford prescription care? So those are things that we also need to look at when we're looking for jobs and what's in our best interest for our families and our children. So I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And now I'm going to come over to Dr. Cherie. I see. Okay, everybody has something. Okay, let's go.
This is really just, I want to lift up something that feels like it's assumed or implied, right? Some of the stats that we're able to have right now, they come from pushing to actually look at Black women, right? And not say, these are the race statistics in a category. These are the gender statistics in a category, right? But actually, Black women as central subjects, right? And doing the research so that you understood what the particular experience is. And, you know, for me, I was kind of raised up by Black feminist scholars. And I feel like this is the important work of being able to get to this place to have the actual conversation about what's going on in Black women's lives so that we can name the challenges that we have and be able to solve them. And I just feel like we've gotten to this place where it's like, you can actually go and get the data and it's not that hard, but it's only been a little while that we've been able to actually, you know, specifically say, I want data on Black women, right? And I just think that it's extremely important that we keep pushing because there are still so many folks who will very easily say, oh, well, this is what it is in race and this is what it is in gender, right? Like, and not actually give you the full, like a more full picture or even ask the right questions for us to be able to solve some of these challenges.
Janae?
Yeah, I will shout out, I don't know if she's on the call, but our policy analyst in our office, Carmina Hanna, she often will talk about aggregating the data. And as you know, Dr. Cherie is describing so that we can see those layers and where the cuts are, because it's important to really narrow and zone in. And it helps to give voice to specific, to specific issues and specific challenges so that we can really be sure we're targeting the response in the places where it's needed. I just wanted to highlight too, I appreciate Chief Clark's point around, there's been a lot of policies that have really come out of this administration around universal pre-K, cover all kids. You mentioned the family leave, the Equal Pay Act. And so there are several that affect women, and particularly Black women. And so I want to just be sure that some of those are lifted up as well.
Thank you. And Mel, without further pause, because I know you were ready to jump into it before. I just want to give you the floor in terms of telling us what protections are provided to Black women and others under the New Jersey law against discrimination.
Okay, thank you for that, Patricia. Well, before we go into that, I just want to say one thing to Ms. Clark's point, like, I completely understand choosing a state agency to work for because you got those protections. And that's one of the reasons why I chose DCR. I received the protections, and literally, if I'm discriminated against, I'm just like, work at DCR. Are you really going to try this? But yeah, and to kind of like follow up on something that Johnson was talking about, it's just like accessing these programs, getting the need that you want. It was very imperative to have a diverse person in your office in an executive position to actually help and assist with you utilizing all the benefits that you get, utilizing the breaks that you need, and understanding like your situation, because sometimes it's like days are days. We have responsibilities, and having someone that understands, you know, Black women and our trials and tribulations are also this understanding like other BIPOC trials and tribulations. It makes it easier. It makes it more of an empathetic workplace where everyone works better together. Cool. All right, so now I get to go into my whole spiel about the New Jersey law against discrimination. So the New Jersey law against discrimination, it's one of our more comprehensive civil rights laws, and it does provide a lot of protections for Black women. So it provides protections in 3 areas. You have places of public accommodations, which are generally places open to the public, which includes businesses, restaurants, schools, summer camps, medical providers, government agencies, and stuff like that. I want to stress healthcare, hospitals, you have rights, doctor's offices, and anything else in healthcare falls under the law against discrimination. And then it protects you in areas of housing and employment. So we protect a bunch of protected classes. Everyone probably knows the big ones. We protect race, we protect religion, disability, national origin, ancestry, sex. New Jersey protects pregnancy, breast/chest feeding, sexual orientation, gender expression, marital status, domestic partnership / union status, and liability for military service. So you're protected in those areas, and all public accommodations in every other area. Housing adds familial status and source of lawful income. That's really source of lawful income is important because that basically means landlords or housing providers cannot discriminate against you for using a housing voucher. So if someone denies you from using a housing voucher, please make a complaint, because that's a no-no in New Jersey. And then employment has everything that I first listed, and it also adds age, gender information, and a typical cellular or blood trait. Age is an intersection. Everybody hits that age. I believe it's like over 62 or something. You can't be discriminated against. But an important one, a typical cell or blood trait. So in the United States, typically Black women, Black men may have it's not the majority. It's like that's something. So sickle cell anemia is not that uncommon when it comes to the Black population, and they can be discriminated against this. And when it comes to employment or something else, especially if they go into sickle cell crisis. Not sure if everyone knows what sickle cell crisis is, but that's very painful, and it can cause them to miss work over the days. So because that is protected under employment, they should be able to, your employer has to make a reasonable accommodation for stuff like this. There are caveats to that, but please, if it happens, file a complaint and it can go through all the caveats with you. So when it comes to all those protected classes, it's very important to know it can be actual or perceived characteristics. So you don't have to be disabled to be protected under disability. You just have to have someone perceive you as it and discriminate against you because they think you are disabled, because they think you are a certain religion, because they think you are a certain gender identity. That is all protected under New Jersey law against discrimination. And if you report something with us and they retaliate against you, that is also protected under against the law. That's discrimination. So I covered all that, just basically say that Black women are intersectional. We are more than just Black women. We are Black Muslims, we are Black pregnant people, we are Black women with disabilities, Black women that were veterans, are in the military. We are old and young Black women. We are a beautiful array of rainbow of Black women. We are LGBTQAI Black women, and we fall under so many protected classes. And we just need to know that there's more that the LAD protects us under. So if you're a Black woman being discriminated because you're pregnant, we are here to protect you. So essentially, the way we protect Black women is that any person in New Jersey can file a complaint with DCR. And I just want to kind of quickly go through our units. We have 4 wonderful units. 1 unit receives and investigates individual complaints. My unit can open proactive investigations as policy. Another unit provides community support in multiple ways. Patricia's unit is my favorite unit. And another unit provides education and training on the law against discrimination. They also provide anti-harassment, anti-implicit bias trainings. The trainings can be found on our website, and I personally suggest everyone take that because information and education is the best way of helping us and also informing others. And the ones I would suggest, we have our hair discrimination and New Jersey law against discrimination training, understanding implicit bias, strategies for effective bystander intervention, recognizing and responding to microaggressions, and the New Jersey law against discrimination in the workplace. Thank
you, Mel.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to thank you for that. We're putting the trainings in the chat, and okay. I wanted to allow my colleague Kai Durant to actually tell people how to file a complaint with NJ Bias and what that actually looks like. So I have her on camera so that she can piggyback right off of what you were saying.
Okay.
Hello, thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Mel, for giving a great overview of our laws and our protections under our office. I'm going to briefly go over how you can file a complaint. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen and present. So to file a complaint, we have an online system called NJ Bias, which is New Jersey Bias Investigation Access System. So kind of a brief overview, it's an online portal. In order to file a complaint with DCR, you must first submit an intake form, and that can be done online on NJ Bias. To get there, if you go to bias.njcivilrights.gov, that will lead you to our system to file the complaint. If you're not tech savvy, or maybe you might be confused by the process, you can also call and get assistance when filing the complaint. Our hotline number to call for that is 1-833 NJDCR for you, or you can call our housing hotline at 1-866-405-3050. As Mel mentioned, retaliation is prohibited, and also there is a statute of limitations, which is 180 days. So when you go to file a complaint, the left screen, once you click on our system, you'll see there are 6 symbols. The top symbols, the 5, are complaints under our office. So whether it's housing or criminal related, or housing, employment, New Jersey Family Leave Act, or a place of public accommodation. That's just trying to figure out what category is it under. Below that is bias crime, which is the Division of Criminal Justice. And that is if you're going to report a bias crime. So once you log into our system, you'll have these options and it will direct you to the right path. Once you log into your system, we also have a manual that is online. It's translated in English and Spanish, so that will give you step-by-step process on how to file the complaint. It's going to prompt you to create an account if you don't have one already, and I will just ask you for your email, create a username and password. So then kind of going over the process, the first process is intake. Part of this, when you fill out the complaint in the intake form, you will be able to schedule an interview with our DCR investigator. In this interview, the investigator is trying to figure out what is going on. They want to ask questions about what is your story, what is your complaint, to see if we have jurisdiction over your complaint and can help you with that process. Also want to make sure that it's within 180 days. If so, if we have jurisdiction over the complaint, the DCR investigator will prepare a verified complaint form for signature. Once this is signed, the person who filed the complaint is now known as the complainant. This verified complaint form will be served to the respondent, and that is the party who may have violated the complaint in civil rights. The respondent will have a chance to respond to the complaint and give their version of the story of what had happened. So after the intake process, the next process is getting more into investigation. DCR will conduct an investigation, which can include interviews, interviewing the complainant, interviewing the respondent, and interviewing any witnesses that might have know about the incident or been a witness to it. We will review relevant documents, so any photos, video recordings. And at the end of the investigation, if parties have not reached a mutual resolution, the DCR will determine whether there is probable cause to believe that a violation of the LAD has occurred. And if a violation did occur, DCR will be able to prosecute the violation in court or the Office of Administrative Law. And at the conclusion of the case, DCR can order monetary damages to the victim or equitable relief. Thank you. That's a brief overview. I'm going to return this back to Patricia.
Thank you so much, Kai. And I'd like to thank everyone for all of the conversation that we've had so far. I'm going to jump right into Q&A. We're not going to be able to answer all of the questions, but I am going to ask one or two, and whoever would like to answer them, please jump in, and we will have these questions so we can answer them after the call. The first one is, are non-Black women able to hold those coveted positions, the ones that you share, without holding these advanced degrees? Anyone can jump in.
I don't think I fully understand the question.
I think this was very early on in the conversation when we were talking about getting, I think you were actually talking about getting your doctorate, whether, you know, that was that time when you were talking about, you know, needing that to be able to even have that conversation with people.
I mean, I think the thing in general is that when you're thinking about like what's possible in your career, like there's certain careers that, yes, you absolutely have to have particular degrees in order to do it. In order for me to be faculty in a particular way, I do have to have certain degrees, advanced degrees for that. But I also think that this is a question of like, again, the pathways and knowing, you know, how, you know, what is needed in order for you to be there. But if you want a little bit more flexibility around like the areas that where you want to be able to make interventions, it is unfortunate, but it doesn't matter that sometimes, you know, particularly as women, especially as Black women, that you do actually have to be able to bring something else that, and that's still been my experience, that has people think, you know, I'm going to at least listen to you. And hopefully that will change. Right? Hopefully the generations behind us aren't having that same experience. But that is very much so like when I was kind of crafting my career, the thing that I felt like was extremely important.
Thank you. Next question, is there any correlation between the current climate and the women or Black women gaps within leadership at hospitals, universities, and financial institutions? It seems to me when the economy trends down, women and people of color in leadership roles are moved out because others may feel they aren't capable or competent to weather the economic downturn. Seems the economy wipes out the gains that women and women of color have in these areas.
So I'm going to talk. That's a multifaceted question because you're kind of talking about like women and people of color being pushed out of positions. That happens multiples of ways. So if they're experiencing a hostile work environment at work, then it might be a choice for them to get out. But what tends to happen, or what I've seen tends to happen, is that during economic turndowns, everybody needs to really choose and decide what they need to do. And childcare is typically a big factor of that. So what may happen is that typically women, more likely women of color, have to compete with trying to find childcare and then adhering to a very strict work schedule. Like for instance, the diverse offices I've been at have given time, like if they're having problems with childcare and getting your child ready in the morning or finding someone else, they will allow a grace period because they understand that you need to make these decisions, or they would allow for more work from home options. In other work environments, if they want to get rid of you, they will apply those laws to every chance that they can to try to push people out. So once they believe that, hey, so-and-so has a kid, they're late, their kid's going through something, we're just going to throw on we're just going to like tack on tardies and like try to build up something to try to oust them, which is illegal because they're essentially might be picking and choosing when to apply a company policy and use it against you, which you should file a report to DCR because they might be targeting you because of something, a protected class. So I won't say that like the economic downturns are essentially what forces women and people of color out of leadership roles, are truly blame the economy. I'll just blame the people that are working there and trying to make these decisions and force other people out.
Okay. Munira writes, I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. My domestic partner and child were banned from visiting my apartment. Can a landlord ban your family or mate from your apartment? Is that legal?
That's a legal question. I think I'm the only lawyer here. So first and foremost,
two of you.
Oh, there's two. Thank God I'm not alone. First thing I will say is check your lease. Sometimes a lease will have how often someone can visit. Landlords are, well, I don't know all the facts, and from what I've had, typically a landlord cannot outrightly ban somebody from visiting an apartment. Oh, the question disappeared. So yeah, definitely check your lease. And if not, you can file a complaint if they're banning them because LGBTQ, that's something that they should not be able to do. You can file a complaint with DCR. If anything ever happens, you might have to file a complaint in court against your landlord. But I am not giving legal advice. That's just what I think should happen.
Oh, thank you for that. We are going to have to stop at this point. It is 8 o'clock. We have some closing remarks to include, so please bear with us for another few minutes, but I would certainly love to thank Chief Charnette Clark, Dr. Cherie Davis Faulkner, Janae Johnson Esquire, and Mel Walker for an amazing conversation today. And I'd like to turn this over to Kai Durant to provide us some closing remarks. I do want to mention there are some things in the chat. All the resources are going to be part of a resource document that we're going to provide to you after this program is finished. And also, please complete the survey. We'd love to know how we did and what we can do for you in the future. So with that, I thank you and thank everyone. And Kai, it's all yours.
Thank you. I want to echo Patricia and say thank you to our amazing panelists. The time flew by for me. I feel like I learned so much. Not only am I feeling inspired, I'm feeling empowered hearing about all the panelists' different experiences, navigating the work as Black, having to work twice as hard, or being underestimated by their peers because of their race and gender, all the identities. There's, I think, a lot of similar stories that I relate to, and I'm sure many of the audiences do too. And I think one of the panelists has said, just even hearing other people speak about similar stories, you know that it's not just you, it's more other people. It's not you're the odd one, you're not the issue. It's a systemic thing that's going on. But also hearing about how you all are able to navigate these spaces, finding mentorship, finding your unions or community groups, and making an effort to make sure that you're empowering the next generation, empowering each other, building that bonding connection is so important and vital. But I want to thank you all so much for sharing your experiences and your personal stories. I know that definitely impacted me, and I'm sure it impacted everyone else. Also want to say thank you to the whole crew team, the people working behind the scenes, Jonathan, Fanny, and Tabitha. You guys have all been amazing. And I want to thank the audience for taking time out of their Wednesday night to join us today to participate in this space. And hopefully that you will take this knowledge away with you and share it with your community, share it with other people, and continue to build this collective of Black women, empowering each other, hearing our stories, and making a change in our workplaces. I hope everyone has a great rest of the night and a great rest of the evening. And thank you all for being here and allowing us to have this space.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.